where I worked in an R&D company, we wouldn't have got out of bed for, those kinds of projects. There's a bit of undercost and over-deliver. And I think the research councils need to hear that loud, especially when they only give us 80% of the full cost anyway. So they are getting an absolute bargain from my perspective.
Hello there, I'm Sarah McCluskey, and this is Research Adjacent. Each episode, I talk to amazing research-adjacent professionals about what they do and why it makes a difference. Keep listening to find out why we think the research-adjacent space is where the real magic happens. For this episode, I'm talking to Ged Hall, a research impact specialist based at the University of Leeds. With many years of experience working in R&D at British Gas, initially with lasers, and then even more years supporting student and researcher development, he was well placed to step in and help when research impact became a thing in the early 2010s. In our conversation, we talk about his career path and the differences between industry and academia. I can tell you one thing, and that is that the induction process at British Gas sounds way more fun than what I've experienced at universities. We also turn our attention to his upcoming season of the Research Culture Uncovered podcast, where he's going to be looking at the future of research impact culture. Ged needs your help for that, so listen on to find out how you can contribute. Welcome along, Ged. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for asking me. It's a real pleasure, and I've enjoyed listening to some of your podcasts. So I hope I'm useful content for you.
Oh, I'm sure you will be, and I'm sure the audience will be really interested to hear about what you do. So if we start there, could you tell us about what your role is currently?
Yeah. So interestingly, for my career, I've actually been doing more or less the same thing for the longest part of my career. I'm kind of the rest of my career is more magpie, do a bit of that. But since 2011, I've been at the University of Leeds, and I work in the organisational development and professional learning, so ODPL in our acronyms. And obviously that does staff training, that's the professional learning part of it, and obviously OD projects. So I've been working in that space since 2011 with a focus on research impact. So in terms of the professional learning side of things, I kind of do everything from bespoke coaching, so that might be with individual researchers or groups on some cognate projects, or if it's a really big project, on the same project, and also kind of longitudinal programs that run at the moment. They run about a term in terms of content time, and we take people through from kind of thinking about impact at the really first early stages, and then kind of really trying to help them plan. And because it's longitudinal, it's actually trying to apply the learning, not just, ooh, that was interesting, I'll write it down and then forget about it afterwards. So on the OD side, one of the things I've been involved with is for about 3 years up until around 2021, 22, I was working with. He was our Dean of Research Quality and Impact. So essentially, he had the ref issues. He's now our Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. But I was working with him 2 days a week on an OD project to develop the university's impact strategy, which was signed off by Research and Innovation Board, or other institutions would call that Research Committee, but at the university level, in February 2021. So we've been kind of working on the delivery plan of that strategy since then, which has involved a kind of new directorate in our research and innovation services, which is focused on research impact and knowledge exchange. So those are the sorts of things I get involved with.
So it sounds like research impact is something that Leeds has taken very seriously.
Yeah, it is. With our new Vice Chancellor and the kind of the refresh of the university level strategy, impact is actually one of the, let's see if I can remember it, the 3 pillars of our, and not just research impact, but impact in everything that we do. I kind of sometimes look at the claims around student education and go, well,
Hmm.
you know, that we need more detailed evidence on that. But I think at Leeds we've actually done some really great work in terms of drilling down into kind of understanding the impact of our student education on the
Mm.
people that go through it, and then what they do in their lives. I won't say careers because not
Yeah.
all of them come to university just to push a career, but what they do in their lives after it. So yeah, impact is absolutely fundamental. To be honest, if you look at our university charter from 1904, impact was in there. It just wasn't written as impact.
Yeah.
Um, so I think Leeds has always had that. I'm trying to think of the way, but an
Yeah.
engaged university with its community around it and its industries. You know, in the Leeds area, there was lots of textiles in that kind of period. There's still a load of research around
Yeah.
textiles being done at the university. So yeah, I think as a university we were always engaged, and that I did my PhD there a long time ago. I did actually say the number, but you might have missed it, listeners. And even back then, I felt that it was an engaged university, even though I did a very fundamental
Mm.
PhD project, basic science.
It's interesting the way some of the universities that I think Sheffield's the same, where this idea of being part of the community and being like for the community and working with the community, it was embedded right from when they were set up. It's interesting that Leeds is that way as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. I mean, one of the directors of ODPL, Organizational Development and Professional Learning. I'll say it again because it's hard for people
Mouthful.
to remember. But she was at Sheffield, and she very much feels that same
Mm,
that same
yeah.
thing from there. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. But as you say, there's gone through sort of changes of terminologies and things like that over the years. So when you came into this role in 2011, I think it was, you said,
Mm,
was when research impact was kind of becoming a thing.
yeah.
What brought you to that point? What other things have you done through your career? You've mentioned a PhD. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I did my PhD was in physical chemistry.
Mhm.
So I can tell you the title, but that'll have people nodding off. Um, I basically use great big lasers to look at small fragments of molecules in
Sounds
flames.
quite cool.
Yeah. So the project was really around understanding the technique.
Mhm.
It was about, is this technique useful? Because it was a novel one. Is it
Mhm.
useful? The short answer is not much.
Okay.
And there was a guy who did the PhD after me who confirmed that in his
Okay.
too. Um, so then I did 10 years in industry. Always working for the same company, but big company, British Gas, as it was, and working for the research and development um, part of the company, which kind of got demerged and moved around. But always, that kind of corporate structure gives you a real bent to kind of try lots of different things. So I guess in the 10 years I was there, I kind of focused in on lots of different technical areas. I didn't carry on being a laser-based scientist.
Mhm.
I did in my kind of first couple of years, but then I kind of moved into software engineering, and then moved into kind of more business consultancy in that space, still kind of reaching into academia and looking for kind of answers to business problems, which is kind of, I guess the starting point of being interested in impact. Um, Actually, that's a lie. My starting point of being interested in impact was the choice of PhD. So I
Mm.
really wanted it to help reduce CO2 emissions. So I have to
Right, yeah.
apologize to all the listeners that I didn't manage to do that.
You
Um,
tried. That's the
I did
important thing.
try. Yeah, it's going back to school. It's the trying that matters, not the
Yes. Yeah.
not the doing. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I did that for 10 years, and then in kind of a bits and pieces of my role, I also got involved in the corporate graduate program, so the
Hmm.
recruitment program. So I used to do residential workshops. There might be 10 of us as kind of tutors on that, and we'd work with teams over 3 to 4 days, sometimes 5, to really kind of build the career of those new graduate entries, both from undergraduate degree, PG taught, and PG research. So I kind of did that sort of on the side just because I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And that was about the time that those of us who were old enough will remember Gareth Roberts and his money coming into the system for PGR and research staff, training and development.
Mm-hmm.
So that was about the time where I kind of went, you know what, I want to make those 5 to 10 days a year that I'm doing in my corporate work, I want to make those my full-time job. And that's when I moved to Nottingham to their graduate school. They were one of the first to start offering research training programs. Mm-hmm. They started doing that in 1996, and I joined them in 2003. And then managed the research training program. So I was promoted while I was there. Mm-hmm. Managed that research training program, grew the team, moved into kind of, not just training events, but kind of more those more longitudinal and therefore more likely to be impactful mm-hmm. Development programs. So met some, recruited some really great people I'm still involved, still connected with, and still speak to on a regular basis. It was a fantastic time, that 5 years at Nottingham. Then I moved to Liverpool Hope, and there I was director of, so it was lead institution for one of the centres of excellence in mm-hmm. teaching and learning, and it was the biggest in terms of numbers of institutions. So there were 16 institutions in that settle, and I was director for that one. And then I was deputy director of another settle called Right Now. That was led by London Metropolitan University and also included Aston. So deputy director of that. And then I was also essentially head of the careers service mm-hmm. and head of the university's writing and studies support service at the university. So kind of a 4-pronged role at the time.
Yeah.
And then did that for 3 years, and then the job at Leeds came up, mm-hmm. and I'd kind of realised, I said I was a bit of a magpie, and I'll go and do that because that's interesting. Well, yeah, the role at Hope was interesting, but not as interesting as the role at Nottingham had been to me personally. I'm talking about my preferences. So when the job at Leeds, which was a 2-year fixed term, came up, it was around the time where the fees were going from roughly 3,000 to 9,000, and Hope had a voluntary redundancy round, and I kind of decided to take that, mm-hmm. And was interviewed. So I handed in my application for VR on a Friday. I was interviewed at Leeds on the Wednesday. Mm-hmm. I think it was Tuesday and Wednesday, actually. I think was it a 2-day? Can't remember now.
Yeah.
And was offered the job, which was great. Started there in August 2011. But yeah, initially on a fixed term, 2-year fixed term contract. And it was supposed to be around enterprise and innovation. So I said, can we do it about impact? Because essentially that covers enterprise and innovation, but impact means more to, the other disciplines that aren't STEM, for instance.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I did that. It was, in the lead up to 2014. So it was kind of like, it was kind of the right pitch at the right time.
Yeah.
The contract was renewed. And then the second time around, managed to make the argument to become permanent. So I've been there ever since.
Oh, well, certainly I think that's a positive message for a lot of people listening. So one thing that comes up in a lot in the conversations I have with people is around, fixed term contracts and moving from one place to another. And I think your story is a really nice example of how you can make that work, and that
Yeah.
Just because something's a short-term contract doesn't mean you should discount it, you know. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I knew I didn't want to stay at Hope, so there had to be something else. And I did apply for jobs like it, but I can't, my heart wasn't in those
Yeah. And that
applications.
comes across,
And
doesn't it?
and I just thought, that's stupid.
Yeah.
This, I love Leeds as an institution, having been a
Mm-hmm.
student there.
Mm.
I did actually start my undergraduate degree at City University in London, and boy from a small town, Blackburn in Lancashire, pitching up at London. I hated London, and I still do. Sorry, but I still do. I go there and make use of its
Yeah.
services, but I'd rather they were somewhere else, those services.
Yeah.
So I did, I came second in the year in the first year, but I was really
Mm-hmm.
going downhill in the second year, and that was due to just hating the place where I lived.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I looked around, and I was able to get a direct transfer to Leeds as a second year. So I
Mm.
kind of gone into the second year. I pulled out of City and went to Leeds the following October.
Yeah.
Direct entry second year. So I've a lot that I owe to Leeds because it rebuilt me as a person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so when the job came up there, it was like, that'll be fab. But I know it'd been a while since I've been away, but I thought I know the buildings.
Yes.
Still know some of the people there. My supervisor was still there. There were
Yeah.
still friends that I'd shared houses with
Yeah.
who were profs by this stage and things like
Yeah.
that. So I thought, well, at least there's some people I know who can buy me a coffee when I pitch up on a
Yeah.
Friday.
Oh, I can empathize with that feeling of nostalgia and connection. I got to go to Edinburgh yesterday, which is where I did my undergrad, and it was a bit like, oh, that's still there, that's still there. Yeah, it's a nice feeling. Makes you feel kind of comfortable as soon as you go in, doesn't it? Yeah.
It does. And that it was my first ever fixed term contract, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of mid-career,
Mm.
at Hope I was, all the different institutions segment the salary scale in different
Yeah.
ways, but it was a grade 9 position
It's pretty senior. Yeah.
yeah. I had fortnightly meetings with the PVC,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, although I reported in a line management sense, the director of library and learning services. So yeah, it was a senior position, and then to kind of go from, it was a step down actually as well in the grade, and go into a fixed term felt risky, but I kind of like, well, I'd rather be happy, and when I looked at my career, I kind of went, well, to be honest, I've done loads of things for 2 years and then gone off and found
Mm-hmm.
something else.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why worry?
Yes, I think that's it. You get to the point where you trust yourself that you'll figure it out. Yeah, if you follow your instincts.
Yeah.
One thing I wonder about though is how you found the difference. Obviously, you've been in academia, then gone to industry, then come back to academia. How you found that transition, how you found the difference between those working environments, or is there a big difference between those working environments?
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a massive difference. So I'd say certainly in the place I worked, collaboration was much more natural.
Mm.
Things being delivered by teams was much more natural.
This is an industry. Yeah.
This is an industry. Yeah. I think there's a bit too much of everything revolves around an individual. I think that's kind of driven by, although we're not academics, that culture of it being driven by the academic, everything's about the academic CV. What's on it? I think that permeates in across the culture in terms of how it operates, even in other non-academic roles.
Mm. I think you're
and
right.
I think that's, 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 I think that's I think that's a risk. You know, the sector is faced by a load of big problems, which needs more, you know, more than one maybe service or one person in the service to really think about. So we really do need to collaborate. I mean, our podcast about research culture, it can't, you know, that's pervasive research culture, and it varies from, you know, one group, one school to the next. So, you know, we all have to be part of that collaboration to improve it. And that's not a natural almost mindset sometimes in academia. Although that's my natural instinct. So I found loads of people to collaborate with, but you sometimes have to make that happen rather than it just be the natural default.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing I think it's interesting. I obviously do a lot of work with research development managers, and they're always saying how expensive university research is. And I kind of go, you've never worked in industry then. Because, you know, certainly where I worked in an R&D company, we wouldn't have got out of bed for those kinds of, you know, those kinds of projects.
Yeah.
It's like, no, absolutely not. No. So I think there's a bit of under cost and over deliver. It's certainly in research projects. And I think the research councils need to hear that loud, especially when they only give us 80% of the full cost anyway.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So they are getting an absolute bargain from my perspective. So that's another big difference, I think, is important here. I mean, interestingly, I think those R&D managers are kind of often look at, you know, individual consultants and go, yeah, they're overheads. Of course they are. But if you look at, you know, I worked for a place that had 2,000 researchers, essentially. You know, that's a big university.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you were to translate it into how many students that would have
yes.
teaching. And we, you know, me in the early part of my career, the cost per day was 565. So we're talking about, you know, I just started working there in 1993.
Okay, yeah.
So and that was cost per day. So
many times that now.
So doing that at a profit. So I think that's another big difference that I noticed. And then the first question I was asked that kind of threw me when I started working at Nottingham again, so first time after 10 years of being in industry, was what are you? And that completely flummoxed me. I was like, well, what do they mean by that?
Yeah.
And it turned out that what they meant was what was your first degree?
Oh, right. Okay.
It's like, well, I haven't been a chemist in 10 years, you know, so that is not what I am.
Yeah. No, do you know, I know what you mean. I had this conversation yesterday with somebody about, you know, what I did for my PhD. And I'm like, well, it was 25 years ago and I haven't done anything with it in those intervening 25 years. So, yeah.
So there's almost this perception that, you know, whatever you do at PhD, you know, maybe PhD level or undergraduate level, if you haven't done a PhD, is what you will always carry on doing.
Yes.
And being.
They like to fit into that box. Yeah.
And so we had a kind of strange conversation for a few minutes. I can't remember who it was that asked me that. That was interesting as well. My first day at Nottingham, I got there and it was just before Christmas actually that I started. And I pitched up and I'd asked all the questions like before arriving, you know, what kind of dress code's appropriate and this, that, and the other. And I got there and, you know, you do expect induction meetings. What I didn't expect was induction parties. So we're going to that office party first and we're going to that, you know, these weren't riots, you know, they weren't people photographing body parts on on
Photocopiers,
photocopiers or anything like that. It was very, cheese and wine type things. But it was like, yeah, we went to 3 different office parties throughout the course of the day. And I thought, that's been an easy day's work.
Well, exactly. If it goes on like this.
Yeah, but then it kind of cranks up, and that's the other thing I think is different in terms of that collaboration perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The kind of expected workloads and what you deliver is also, I think, quite different. Certainly from my in my experience.
Yeah. No. Interesting. I just want to circle back to there. You mentioned your podcast, which is how we got to know each other as fellow podcasters. Would you like to tell us a bit about your podcast?
Yes. So it's called Research Culture Uncovered, available on all platforms. So the team I work in organizational development and professional learning is called Research Development and Research Culture. So that's kind of been added to the team, as a title over the years. And we do a lot of work with Leeds' inaugural Dean of Research Culture. And it was like, yeah, there's a lot of noise about research culture and a lot of discussion about it in the sector. So we kind of thought that it was opportune to kind of for there to be a podcast about it. It isn't just a podcast about what is going on at Leeds. It's very much trying to showcase things that are going across all over the sector. So we spoke to a few colleagues in terms of who wants to be involved. So we have Nick Shepherd, who's our open research advisor in the library. So he's involved in it. It's my boss, Emma Sparry. So she's the head of research development and research culture at the university. She's involved. Ruth Winden is a research careers consultant. So she's not in the careers service. She's in our DPL. Pardon me. Tony Bromley, who's a colleague I've known for donkey's years. When I was at Nottingham, he was at Manchester, and now we work together at Leeds. So he does stuff at the kind of postgraduate researcher level in our team, and he works with a lot of colleagues to run the Researcher Education and Development REDS conference. So he's done a series interviewing lots of people who contributed to that conference last year. So his series was kind of just after the conference. So yeah, so all sorts of different topics. Whether we'll do it, and obviously mine's focusing on my season, which is coming up in 21st of June. It's focusing on the effects of research impact on research culture. There's a lot in the literature that it's always been negative, but actually that I don't think that's actually true. So we're looking at how to make the effects positive. That's the what's the right word? That's a theme.
Yes.
How can we make those effects positive on research culture? What we'll do after, we're not sure. We need to start talking because after my series, it'll be Emma's series. And then whether we move more towards okay, we might do 2 or 3 episodes on a topic, but not call it a season. We might move to that, that kind of model, but it's still to be determined. But I mean, I guess I was probably dragged towards this collaboration as I don't listen a great deal to podcasts. I'm not a natural consumer, so I kind of went, why do I want to be involved in that? But it's been I've really enjoyed the aspect of interviewing people like you're interviewing me, and that fits with my, I'm nosy about people. I'm a collaborator, so it kind of like that really helps, and it's great to get in touch with people and have a chat and find out what they're doing, and that again, that nosiness helps me because it's kind of, that's really interesting. I might have to work out how we can do that at Leeds. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we do showcase what we are doing as well. It's not just telling the sector what's happening in the sector.
Yeah. And there's something that you're hoping that listeners might be interested in contributing to, isn't there?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me about that. Yes. So as I said, my season is about the effects of research impact on research culture. So I guess the first few episodes are kind of like now. What are those effects now? So the final episode is, what do we want those future effects to be? So how do we want research culture to be in a few years' time? I'll leave that open to the listeners and hopefully the contributors to decide. So what do we want that to look like, and how are we going to get there? So those are the questions that I've kind of put out there almost as a crowdsourcing, and it's really to kind of try and showcase all of those ideas that are going on and all of those things that people want to see. And I'm kind of hoping it leads to, more collaboration across the sector internationally, because I'm trying to reach not just UK impact people but people in Australia, people in New Zealand, people wherever. I want you all to say, okay, if impact is a thing in your sector, how are you making sure that in the future that's a positive thing and it really enhances research culture?
Yeah. And if you had a magic wand, what would you like the future of research culture to look like?
Yeah, so I think I've been thinking long and hard about that, because it is a really tough question to kind of drill down to one thing. But I think for me, it's about changing that almost value system that we have. I mentioned the academic CV, and that kind of almost holds sway in terms of our value system in the sector. So I think it's about changing that as a default, and actually recognizing that all the contributions, and not just recognizing, but supporting them as well. So that'd be the thing I'd change. And our impact strategy, for instance, has a goal to go, we need our impact support to be more coherent, so it's more supportive of all the people, academics and non-academics, who are, maybe embedded in projects, who are out there trying to drive policy change, or trying to drive cultural change, or trying to drive just societal improvements in any way. So very much, that's the thing that, we all need to be supported and feel valued.
Yeah.
So that'd be the thing I'd like to change.
Yeah, I think a lot of our listeners would be in agreement with that as well. So thank you. Oh, well, I'm keeping an eye on time, so I think we're going to have to think about wrapping up. So if people want to get in touch with you, whereabouts can they find you?
So I'm on Twitter. It's the imaginatively titled Hall Ged. I kind of do Ronseal titles.
It does what it says on the tin.
Absolutely, yeah. So Hall Ged I'm on LinkedIn, so people can reach out to me there. I don't mind my email being available, if you can stick that in the show notes. I'll not say it out loud because
that's okay. Yeah,
it's tedious. But yeah, and of course, we've got our Research Culture Uncovered company pages on LinkedIn, which is where the information about how to contribute to that final episode in the season.
I'll get links to all of that in the show notes. Yeah. Brilliant. Oh, well, it just remains to say thank you very much for taking the time to come along and have a chat.
Thanks very much for the invite. It's been a fun Friday morning.
Thanks for listening to Research Adjacent. If you're listening in a podcast app, please check you're subscribed and then use the links under the episode to find full show notes and to follow the podcast on LinkedIn, Twitter or Instagram. Also, make sure that you're subscribed to the Research Adjacent Roundup newsletter. You can also find all the links and other episodes at www.researchadjacent.com. Research Adjacent is presented and produced by Sarah McCluskey, and you, yes you, get a big gold star for listening right to the end. See you next time.